Hey, everybody, I'm Michael Prentke, and this is the Bos Bones podcast. I'm really excited today to have a Vicki Garcia here. Um,
Hello,
so,
everyone.
welcome to Vicki. Thanks so much for coming, and I'm really excited to have you here. This is actually our first time meeting, but I'm going to be honest, sorry to come off as creepy, but it is the social media world, and I have seen you on social media, and from what I've seen, you're killing it, which I guess is kind of
Ooh,
what social media is for. But
I guess you'd say so. It's the highlight reel of everybody's life, right?
yeah, but it seems like you've been really doing amazing things here in town, subbing for some pretty major groups and playing with some pretty awesome people. Could you talk
Right.
more about some of those highlights?
Yeah, I've had an unbelievably very grateful career so far as a freelance musician. But this is all obviously pre-COVID, but I've had amazing opportunities to play with, the Boston Symphony Orchestra, the Boston Pops, and being a member of the Boston Pops Esplanade Orchestra and um, Boston Modern Orchestra Project. I've played in some Odyssey operas. Before the pandemic, I was playing with the Boston Lyric Opera, some other groups like Cape Symphony and Symphony New Hampshire, Berkshire Symphony, and just so many groups that I had the opportunity to work with. And it's been such a highlight of my life to
Hmm.
being, working with so many different people, so many different organizations, and just seeing just the vast array of musicians that have come across my field and how that's impacted my playing. It's, I love freelancing. I really do.
How has freelancing impacted your playing? Who are some of those players that have made a big difference? Players or groups or organizations?
Right. Sometimes it's really the orchestra that makes a big impact on your playing. Playing with maybe smaller regional orchestras, you really meet some great individual musicians, and they really inspire you to like maybe connect more with that community that they're a part of. And then you meet some world-class musicians like people at the BSO, and you realize how down to earth they are, and how we think that they're such like gods. I mean, they are in our worlds. They're the prestige people we want to be one day. And then you really get to know them, and you're like, wow, these people are like normal people. I really aspire to be them, not only from the human standpoint, but they're amazing musicians as well. And just speaking from personal experience, having the opportunity to play with people like the musicians from the Boston Symphony has really elevated my playing, how I approach music preparation, how I approach my individual practice sessions. And, I absolutely love it. I love the vast array of people and organizations I get to meet through that.
Hmm. Um, what are what are some of the most notable performances you've had around town?
So obviously playing with the Boston Symphony, like it doesn't really get much crazier than that. And there's actually a fun story, if you don't mind me sharing, of one of the most memorable performances I've ever had. And so backtracking, when I was at my freshman year of college at Boston Conservatory, my grandfather became ill, and he unfortunately passed away.
Hmm. Sorry.
And yeah, it was really sad because he loved music, not as a musician. He loved like opera and classical music just as someone who really enjoyed it. It wasn't a hobby of his. And as a teenager, like in my head, when I'm like a bratty 16-year-old girl, I'm like, I don't want anyone watching me practice. And he would always try to like sneak into the practice room when I would be playing stuff. And he'd always just sit there, like sulking in a corner, just watching me. And I'd be like, Grandpa, stop. It's so annoying. Don't do that. And he goes, I remember it was one of those memories that just sticks with you for life. And he came over, kissed me on the forehead, and he said, when you play in a major symphony orchestra for your first time, I'm going to be there for that concert. I'm going to be there in the
Hmm.
first row. And of course, what's the first thing a 16-year-old girl says when your grandfather says he's going to sit in the first row of an orchestra? One, that's never going to happen. And two, you don't sit in the first row of like the audience when you see an orchestra concert. I'm a trombone player. You sit like further back so you can see the whole orchestra. And so the funny thing that ended up leading to this is that he passed away. He never
Mm,
really got to see me perform. He never got to see a recital. He never got to see where I ended up being in the freelance scene and the opportunities I've had. However, my very first performance with the Boston Symphony Orchestra was playing second trombone on Mahler 2. And Mahler 2 is also known as the Resurrection Symphony. And
wow.
I knew for all those four concerts that I played that my grandfather was there in the balcony watching me perform those concerts.
Wow.
And I felt that energy. I'm like, yeah, I'm a paranormal believer, but it's more of a spiritual thing. Like he told me when I was 16 that he was going to be there, and I know he was there.
Hmm.
And for me, that is the most memorable story I can possibly tell people about a musical experience that really connected with me.
Wow. That's really special. That's really a touching story. Were
Yeah.
so were you nervous at that performance? I imagine maybe thinking about your grandfather being there with you, maybe that sort of comforted you.
It was Mahler 2 is such a long symphony. It is taxing mentally. You're tasking in moments and you're really getting to absorb the orchestra. And that was my very first experience with the Boston Symphony. I have never heard musicians like that. I mean, I've heard them because I watched performances that they did, but to be involved and like watching that happen around you, a lot of the time I had tunnel vision because I was like, I need to focus on Toby Oft. I need to focus on Jim. I need to focus on Amanda Stewart, Mike. It was like tunnel vision in like select zones. And I'm like, how can I like involve all this together? So it was like a sensory overload my very first time playing with him, and on such a huge piece that I remember there's a specific snapshot in my memory of about 5 seconds that's 5 seconds long. It was the second concert that we did, and at that moment we were in like the fourth movement, so we're getting near the end. I'm like, oh my god, okay, the final stretch is coming. And there's this moment where the vocalist is singing and you just feel like this warmth in your chest of like just heartache and resurrection, and like all of these feelings come out. And I remember I got teary-eyed because that's when I felt him like
Hmm.
present in that moment. And I was just like, and like I put my head down, and like, because you never want to move in the orchestra because you know that they're filming, and you never want to show that you're being anything else but professional. So I remembered I like just tilted my head down ever so slightly and like smiled, a very small inward smile. Like I felt him there, like just as an acknowledgement. And then I carried on with the performance with so much I mean, every performance was enthusiastic, but with just a sense of pride. I couldn't believe that I was there in that moment playing with the musicians that I was playing with. And, every time I get to play with the Pops or the symphony, I cherish every single one of those moments all the same.
Sure. I want to go back a little bit. You were talking about your conversations with your grandfather and how, it's like, oh, as a young kid, I was a teen, thinking like, oh, like I'm
Yeah.
I'm never gonna, I'll never be in the orchestra. I'll never make it. What shifted? Why do you think you originally had that thought that you wouldn't make it, and how did you
I guess I
persevere?
wouldn't say that I never thought I would make it, because my dream as a 14-year-old girl even was to eventually want a job or to perform in a major symphony orchestra. It was more like the snarky little kid in you that doesn't like the attention that your grandparents give you, and you're just trying to like push them away because you're a teenager and you're like dealing with your own problems. And it was more like just like, get out of here, grandpa, I don't want you involved in my practicing. And so, I would definitely say my goal has never stopped. I'm 28 now, and I my dream is still to be in a major symphony orchestra. I still want to do those, the audition prep, and take auditions, like it's a hard game, but that goal has never changed. If anything, it's gotten more intense the
Hmm.
more and more I get opportunities to play. And my grandfather's going to be there along with me every time I practice. Every time, I could still, even there's some days where I'm practicing and I still just, I feel his energy sitting in the corner of a room. Not in a
Hmm.
creepy way, but like I know he's listening.
Wow. Um, so what does that process look for you right now for making auditions or practicing for auditions? I mean, outside of COVID, obviously that's been a huge uh, dampening of
Definitely.
all of that. But before that, what did that look like for you?
So before COVID happened, obviously, freelancing is a work that I love so much. But if you're not careful, the only thing you end up preparing is freelance music. You only start getting ready then for the next gig because you're starting to get so busy with work that although you're on top of your playing game, you're doing everything the best as you can, even better than you think you can, and you're preparing every performance better and better and better. If you're not careful with how you practice, you can be stuck in a rut. Things begin to not work as well as they used to. Maybe your flexibility gets stiff. So it is really important, especially getting ready for auditions, is to find time in your day. If it's late at night, I'm a late night practicer. If I have to do it at 10:30 at night, I'm going to do it at 10:30 at night, but I have to go practice. Make sure I get that flexibility. Make sure I do those fundamentals because at the end of the day, I could be in the best shape, but if I can't get my fundamentals right that help me gear ready for an audition, then I'm setting up myself for failure. So let's uh, let's say back in March. So back in March, I was getting ready for an audition. I was going to go to Europe and take the Brussels Symphony audition because I was going to go to Europe anyway to see a friend's wedding in Macedonia, and which is where my husband is from. And so I was like, hey, once we get to Europe, it's super cheap to fly there. So I'm killing two birds with one stone. So I was like, great, I'm going to take the Brussels Symphony audition. And I decided, I was like, all right, I'm really busy, but how can I make this work? I got to make this work. And so we began. My husband is he's a huge influence in my practice sessions. He loves listening to me. He loves making sure that I'm doing the right things. He's kind of like a doctor, um, making sure I am prescribing myself the right medicine, so to speak, my fundamentals. He's making sure that my high register is always on point because I'm pretty lazy about working that area because it's more of a weak area for me, but I will never let people see that weak side. So, gearing up for that, he's helping me with all of these things that he finds maybe a little bit weaker in my playing. He's like, all right, let's try this, let's do this. So we'll work on excerpts slowly, figuring out why something doesn't work, and if something doesn't work, what kind of fundamental exercise can I do to help prepare for that, make this excerpt flow more easier? What kind of mental preparation can I do? And all the while, you need to practice your next freelance music, your next gig music, because sometimes that music is a lot harder than excerpts that you're actually getting ready for. So, which is wild. And then you can do those things, but then an excerpt that everybody knows, you mentally have a blockade gets set up for you. So back in March, it was a constant game of, all right, I need to spend an hour practicing some freelance music, and I'm going to stop it there. And then I'm going to spend the next hour and a half working on my fundamentals and incorporating some excerpts in there that I know go with these exercises. So it was busy, and I still kept up that practicing up until April. Then April happened and things were definitely indefinitely shut down. And the more things began to shut down, the more and more I was like, so what am I getting ready for? What's
Hmm.
happening? When are these auditions going to happen? And I don't know if I don't know if you know Last Row Music. Um,
No.
Oh, okay. So Last Row Music is a great website. They show auditions that are coming up. They have a bunch of journals. It's basically the whole last row of the orchestra. So it's trumpets, French horns, tuba, trombones, And they show journals and job opportunities, people who won jobs. And if you look now, there's really not many job opportunities to audition for. So there's that.
Is it because of COVID they're not taking auditions, or you think that the opportunities aren't there?
I really think it's a lot of orchestras have not either one been able to open up and like support a season for musicians, for their own musicians, so therefore they can't take auditions to take on new musicians. So that's what I think. But I also think it's there's you can't now in most cases go to another state without quarantining for 2 weeks or getting vaccinated, or I mean not vaccinated, tested.
Right.
So I think there's that. So a lot of orchestras are like, well, we can't have an open audition or even take auditions with people who we think have great resumes, because it's just not logistically possible at this time. So I really think that's why there's not many audition opportunities happening right now.
Sure. I was thinking about something you said earlier, how um, you've had a lot of really unique and special opportunities to play with some really incredible orchestras and players. And um, I've heard kind of through the grapevine that the Boston music scene, maybe orchestral scene, it can be a little bit like kind of like there's like maybe like an unspoken line, like there's kind of like the old dogs, and it's like, oh, like here comes Vicky, this young 28-year-old, and here she comes, and she's maybe kind of cutting the line, like who is she? Have you
Right.
ever rustled?
Ruffled
What's the
some
word?
feathers.
Have you ever ruffled those feathers? Have you butt heads, or have you experienced any of that kind of
I
I dare say entitlement or something?
um the one thing I really work hard on is when I show up to, let's say, more of these prestigious gigs where there's, you have a community of musicians who are much older than you. They have a lot more experience in the Boston freelance scene. And you're like, these people are colleagues to each other. And so when someone who's new in the freelance scene joins in, you don't want to be casting all that attention to yourself. And I do a really good job of staying, I think, under that radar. I don't bring attention. My goal when I show up to a freelance orchestra scene, whatever gig, is that I stay so far under the radar. No one notices me. I'm just another person. I'm just, if I'm playing in the Boston Symphony, I don't want the orchestra to turn around and be like, wait, that's not someone we recognize. I want them to be like, oh yeah, rehearsal was great. And if they happen to turn around and see that it was just me sitting there, they're like, oh, Vicky's here. It's cool. And I feel like there's more of an acceptance that happens if you're not making a scene for being the new kid in town getting work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Have
So if you're hearing through, let's say, the grapevine that I'm, so to speak, cutting that barrier that exists, I think then I'm doing a good job because I have yet to hear about it.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply like you specifically, like,
Right, right,
oh,
right.
like Vicky's done
I know
this.
what you mean. It's just a generalization, and it's a lot of these musicians that are in this orchestra are in these orchestras, especially the like the freelance ones. They're fantastic musicians. Like they're top-notch players, and there's a reason why they have been freelancing for all of these years. And as someone who's new to the scene, you have to respect that. I mean, you might know a lot of amazing musicians your age too, playing those instruments, but they have been playing their instruments for way longer, have a lot more experience, and have that connection with that entire community. And you have to respect that as a freelance musician. And you can't just come in like some hot shit and think you can change something, because you're not. All you can do is, really be respectful of that community, be grateful that you get to be a part of it, even if it's temporarily.
Hmm. What would happen if you weren't?
If I wasn't a part of that community,
No, if you did come in and you ruffled feathers and you
I
you
don't think
kind of
I'd be
acted.
doing a very good freelance scene right now if I did, to be honest. You
Have you
know, I
heard
don't,
about people doing that or?
I've heard about some interesting scenarios. I definitely don't want to like mention the people because I don't like talking gossip. I mean, I love hearing it. I don't like talking about it. So I've definitely heard of some stories, especially when I was at NEC in college. You know, some members of a brass section, you know, they started wanting to be more in the freelance scene, and they would, let's say a contractor asked them, hey, can you play your instrument? I need a piccolo trumpet. Can you play this? We're going to give you $300. And I remember I asked this kid, I'm like, why didn't you take the gig? He was like, oh, because I'm not bringing my piccolo trumpet just for a $300 gig. And I was like, um, you're a young musician in one of the most major cities for music. You should be doing that gig for free. I mean, I think every musician should get paid, but if you're trying to make yourself known in the freelance community, you don't say no to an opportunity for someone to understand your playing. You know, I've done my fair share of free gigs. I still do my fair share of very low pay gigs if that means it's an opportunity to get into a teaching scene, another freelance section that I'm trying to get into or incorporate myself into, more people I need to get to know, what more people I want to know me and how I play and how that can spread. And so, you know, you definitely hear stories of people burning bridges before they've even had a chance to like cross it, you know. So yeah, and then you hear about your typical person who likes to brown nose a lot. You know, they're trying to get in so bad that they try to make it like a very very thin connection with every person they know, and that sometimes doesn't feel genuine. You know, I know a lot of musicians that are like that, and I do keep my radar on them when I show up to a gig because I'm like, I really don't want this person to know this much about me because I don't want them to feel that they have a connection, an authentic connection with me that they don't have, you know? So that's
Oh,
why I like to keep very under the radar when I show up to any gig. I just show up, I do my work. I'm very social to the members that I'm sitting next to, so they understand my personality, you know, that I'm very serious when I play, but I can be very lighthearted and social when the instrument's not in my hand. But I will never be a brown noser.
um, you made an interesting distinction about getting paid versus not getting paid. And what does that look like for you? That sort of mathematics in your mind. Like when do you decide to take not paying or low paying gigs? Yeah.
So I'm a part of a union now, the musicians union, and I really do. I don't like to accept work that's not union wage anymore, because you know I really feel that I've worked really hard in my life to be able to have the opportunity to say no. I think I deserve better. However, when I was a college student, even my master's, even the first 2 years out of my master's degree from NEC, I was taking um, some very low paying work, and the reason why I did it is because I needed to make a foot stamp in that freelancing. I needed people to see, oh, I recognize that blonde trombone player from somewhere. Where did I ever last see her? And then they, you know, connections start to get made that way. And so when I was my sophomore year at Boston Conservatory, that's when I started getting my first freelance work. It was very minimal work. It's fine. Things like happening on a weekend for $50 here. Another thing for, hey, if you do this for free, we'll let you play in our orchestra sometime. That never happened. So like a lot of these times I was doing stuff for free that I was like, and it was so much work. You know, you wake up at like sometimes 6 in the morning to show up to some like fun run over on like Coolidge Corner, and it's 50 degrees in the morning and you're playing like a brass quintet and you're not getting paid to do it. And so I was like, there were some mornings I'm like, why am I doing this? and um, and then other days, and then so sometimes all the free stuff that maybe you say yes to, or the low wage stuff you say yes to, it doesn't always mean it's going to lead to something. You know, it's really like Russian roulette. You don't know what you're going to get. But I've had opportunities where I have said yes to maybe not the best gig, but there was, let's say, a trumpet or a bass trombone player that was like, hey, I'll have to, can I get your phone number? I'm gonna have to call you for some work. I need a trombone player for X, Y, and Z. And then you show up to X, Y, and Z, and the conductor is like, they just make that face, right? They don't acknowledge you in the orchestra. They're just like, and then they just carry on with their business. They made the acknowledgement that, I've never seen that musician. They impressed me. I don't go up to the conductor afterwards and be like, hey, it's so great to play in your orchestra, you know? It's just more like, can I make an impression without using my words? And that's the opportunity I took from getting low wage work to no wage work whatsoever. Um, you know, even now, especially during COVID, you know, I've had some people ask me to do some things for free. If you're a friend, of course, I'll do it for free. If you know, if you want me to want me to teach a demo lesson for an Alexander Technique student, I will give a demo lesson. You know, just, you know, I'm trying to open up opportunities, and I think, especially people who are trying to get out in the freelancing, you have to know your worth, but you also have to know where an opportunity lies.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a short break, so grab a snack, play some long tones, and we'll be back in a minute. Now, back to the show. Was your playing ever not enough? Did you have to do more?
I don't feel that I've had that experience yet. I'm very self-critical of my playing. That's why, if you notice on my social media, I never post about my trombone playing. I'll post
Hmm.
about the opportunities I've had. I'll post maybe, I'll share a video every now and then of me playing in a symphony or pops experience, but I'll never share my video work. And the reason is because I'm extremely self-critical to a point of sabotage,
Hmm.
about my playing. And because I'm so aggressive about how I prepare, I have never showed up to an occasion where I've been underprepared. If anything, I've been over the top in my preparation, that um, it's been very helpful. So I've never felt that in a gig experience I have been below par of where I've had to be. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Um. Hmm.
And that's my personal opinion. You know, maybe someone who's played with me has been like, well, I remember a time. And I'm like, well, okay, we'll keep it to yourself.
What does that look like for you when you say like being hyper prepared, but more so like self sabotage? Do you ever get a what's it called, imposter syndrome, or yeah?
Well, so my self sabotage happens privately. So when I'm at home practicing, when I'm in a warm up room, when I'm at an audition, when I'm in a group warm up room for an audition, and you know, I guess you could say I'm not sure exactly what imposter syndrome is, but I would say that there is a different Vicki that comes out when it comes time to sit in a chair and perform. Something else takes over, She takes everything she learns in a practice session and applies it right when it's needed. No self-sabotaging in a concert setting. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That negative self-talk, that aggressiveness of having to play things in a certain way. But I would definitely say the self-sabotaging happens more privately. And the second I have to perform, she switches. She's like, all right, now it's time we can't do this anymore. We have to do this right now. And I would prefer that self-sabotaging doesn't exist all the time, even in my private practicing, because it's really, especially during COVID, it's debilitating because you're just now with yourself all the time. You don't get the opportunity to perform and turn that part of your brain off. You're just with yourself in the practice room and you're nitpicking at every possible thing that has gone wrong up until that point. And that led to me having a few months during this pandemic, even where I couldn't practice. I couldn't be alone with myself in a room anymore to practice because I didn't have a goal-oriented thing where I was going to be able to turn it off, a performance setting, for example. But yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. What about external sabotage? Have you ever experienced that from other people or other factors in a situation?
As a woman, yes. I wouldn't exactly call it sabotage that's obvious. I'd call it like maybe more passive aggressive comments. Um, there's an example. I played with a group. I'm not going to name the group, but I had played with this. They had hired me for 2 years to play, usually for second trombone, because their second trombone player was usually out of town, and they always needed a player, so they always called me to come and fill in for them. And I became really good friends with their bass trombone player in this orchestra, and he loved talking to me. He was like, "Oh man, you sound great. I love having you here. Super nice guy. Not the best orchestra, but just again, a great community of people who love playing music and are really passionate about putting a performance together." And the very first time I got to meet their second trombone player, I was playing the lead on a pops concert, a very heavy pops concert for this size orchestra. Even I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And so I remember I met this guy. We only had one rehearsal and then 3 shows. And he comes up to me, and an older gentleman, and I can't remember his exact words, but the implication was, "I hope you play as good as you look." And the one thing people may or may not know about me is that I'm extremely aggressive. I don't take shit. Sorry for the language. I don't take crap from people, especially when it comes to something that's referring, especially from a stranger who has heard things about my playing from a colleague and is now being threatened by someone who he's now going to have to play next to. And this was recently. This was, just a few months, a couple months before the pandemic happened. And there was a part of me that wanted to yell at him so bad, like fire, but I know how to stay professional and I know how to shut people down in a professional way. I don't remember what I said, but it said something like implying like, "Oh, well, you better button yourself up because shit's about to get real." And I'll tell you what, sometimes people can only believe what they hear, and after that first rehearsal, after the first half hour, we got a break, you could see the apology in his face for what he had said. And I don't think he meant it in such, I would say this person must be between the ages of maybe 50 and 65. I really couldn't pinpoint it exactly. Yeah. Old enough to be my father, basically. Why would you feel that you need to say that to somebody? And I think he realized after the fact, after he realized what I brought forward to that table and to that rehearsal, and that the conductor was a huge fan of mine, and he became very aware of that. He was extremely sorry and wanted to be nothing but my number one fan by the end of the whole series of concerts. And I think that form of sabotage, especially to someone you don't know, can be very hurtful. But for me, I unfortunately have had a lot of experience like that being a female trombone player, and um, I know how to take it and to completely wipe out that candle. I'm gonna burn that flame. I'm gonna make sure that you're gonna regret it in the most non-aggressive way possible.
Hmm. Do you feel like things are changing? I mean, I know we're still young. We're
Mm-hmm.
about the same age,
Yeah.
but um, even in your short career, do you feel like you've seen the culture of sexism in the music world shifting or changing?
It's hard to say. I have still surprisingly yet play in a section with a majority of women. And I can only really name two experiences. One was when I had my first BSO encounter, playing Mahler 2. I got to play with Amanda Stewart, and she is the associate principal of the St. Louis Symphony. And she has been my idol because she is a badass female trombone player with a position in an orchestra, and she's my height and she's got blonde hair, and it's just like it makes me so excited. And so I was totally I told you I like to stay under the radar and stay quiet. I had to come up to her privately. I'm like, I just wanted to let you know I'm your number one fan. And I said it like so. I didn't even recognize my voice when I said it, but I was just like, "You're my number one fan." And so like I was just like, I the other experience I had was I was in the ITA competition with Robin Smith, Brittany Lash, and Christopher Bassett. That's three girls and a boy. Three women and a man. Sorry, um, we're not kids. So we won the ITA competition together, and there was a slight fear that we wouldn't win because we were majority women. There was an
Hmm.
honest fear that that was going to be the case. And so the fact that it had to even get brought up that we might not win because we were majority women in a year that was at the time 2017 was like, is that for real? Is that even a can that even possibly be the case anymore? It ended up not being the case. We ended up winning the competition. We were all like super ecstatic, but those two experiences and playing with Amanda Stewart was the last time I've had the opportunity to play with another woman in my section. And so playing with Amanda Stewart was back in October 2018. It's now 2021.
Hmm.
So I would definitely say some things have changed. I would say there's not enough change. I'm it could just be the age bracket that I'm in. I haven't yet had the opportunity to play with a lot of women in my section or in the trombone career. But I'm also having to play gigs with people who are a lot older than I am, and those people who are a lot older than I am are not women. They're mostly men. So I do think some things are changing, but I think in the years to come, like let's say 10 years, I think we're going to start to see more women who are taking positions in orchestras.
Why? What was changing?
I I would love to know the exact thing that's changing, but I'm hoping that more people who are saying yes and no to people on a panel, a jury panel, are that there's some kind of representative there to make sure that they're not saying yes or no because they notice that that person could have been a female or that person sounded very light when they were walking onto the stage. I'm hoping that there is some kind of union representative that are more up there at auditions that are going to be like, what is your reason why that this person didn't advance, just to make sure it wasn't because they were male, female, black, white, anything.
Hmm. That. That's I guess I'm wondering if can you make a connection about the way that sexism plays out at a lower level, maybe in grade school, middle school, high school, even college. What
I
I
remember, so I was very lucky. My mom, she played tuba in college. And that's where she met my father. My father was a percussionist, so back row crowd. So when it came time for me to pick an instrument, and my sisters are also brass players. My mom was very clear that the only instruments we could pick were brass instruments. And when I asked her if I could play flute or clarinet, she told me, "You cannot pick an instrument that fits in your backpack." Okay, mom. Well, what
wow.
else can I play? And she's like, well, you could play French horn, trombone. And just having a mother figure telling you that you can do these things at such a young age, you don't realize that someone is going to eventually tell you that you can't.
Hmm.
I had such a strong influence, and I didn't see, call it blind or call it that I had so much, support at home, but I didn't notice that there was a problem in the brass community until I was in maybe late college. I never saw myself as a female brass player. I saw myself as 100% a badass trombone player in high school. Forget the gender. I had the support as a young girl to know that I could do whatever I wanted with my instrument. I could pick whatever instrument I wanted. If I wanted to play French horn, then I was going to play French horn, and I was going to make sure that I was a French horn player, not a female French horn player.
Hmm.
And so, starting off at a young age of having the opportunity to develop myself as a female, as a trombone musician that was a female versus a female trombone musician was a very different mindset. And only till I reached college did I really notice that there was some problems in the whole education system of, how some women can be treated in lessons or in opportunities and things of that sort.
Do you mind getting into specifics of that?
Sure. So none of these experiences are my own. These are definitely experiences that I've heard from others. I've been very, very, very fortunate that I've never had an uncomfortable encounter in a lesson, but I've definitely had some uncomfortable encounter in the orchestra scene as a college student. And one of those was that at one point I felt that I was being punished in like orchestral assignments. And I kept noticing that whenever they would punish me, I was never allowed to play an orchestra.
When you say assignments, you mean like which orchestra you get to play in and your seat, right?
Exactly. So those college years where you're in a roster and they're like, all right, here's the casting for orchestra, philharmonia, whatever it is. And I started noticing that I was getting less and less casted, but I was a great player. But then I was like wondering, am I a good player? Am I good enough? Am I not good enough? What's happening? And I started noticing the rosters more and more, and I started wondering, well, what is wrong with this picture? And so I remembered I had talked to an administrative member about it, and in doing that, it ended up punishing me more because I said
Wow.
something, and I was taken out of the orchestral scene altogether in my college years. And I was like, wow, this is unacceptable from a school administration. And later on, I found out that the school was notorious not just in the music community but also in the composition community for I wouldn't say punishing women, but for making them pay in
Hmm.
a way. And it was very frustrating. And I really couldn't wait to get away from that kind of environment, because I was so happy with the people I was studying with trombone wise, that no matter what they did to me, I was going to focus on what I was going to school for, and that was to be a better trombone player. Getting an opportunity to play with an orchestra, in school is a great learning experience. You're learning how to play in a section. And thankfully, I had plenty of experience playing with sections that, missing out on those opportunities didn't really matter to me at that point. Me being an individually better trombone player is what mattered. And, and it kind of, it really sucked, because even to this day, it's a lot less, but I still have resentment for that situation. Still have resentment for those people who thought it was okay to not only punish me, but punish some other women brass players that I know. And you have to really ask yourself, at some point, do they not like you, or do they not like you playing that instrument? Which is never really the case, because you don't wonder if people don't like that you're playing that instrument. So they're I don't know. It's a very loaded question, and sometimes I always have question marks thinking about it. It's like, why? What's the reason that X, Y, and Z exist? Why is that I'm being punished for bringing up something that I think is unfair?
So there was never any kind of resolve or vindication or resolution or anything. So those
No,
people
and
are
a
still
lot of
working in
the
those
cases it's
positions.
that way. Yeah, a lot of the case it's that way. You never really get an answer or a resolution to that problem. I've also been at gigging opportunities where when you do a lot of freelancing, you're always playing with people you don't know. And that also means playing with not very great people musically and personality wise. They're just their characters together, just not a good mix. And so I remember once I played with a group, not a great group, but it was a group that I enjoyed playing with, because they played really good music. And I was like great opportunities for me to like learn alto trombone playing and soloing and all that stuff.
Hmm.
And so, I love currently, whenever I get work again with them, but I love playing with them. And they once hired a second trombone player, who, like I said, really wasn't that great. And we were doing Symphonic Metamorphosis. And I love that piece. One of my favorites. And he was, one, clearly not prepared. Two, was playing on a slide where you can like hear the grit in his slide. And all I
Oh,
kept
that's
thinking,
embarrassing.
it was so embarrassing. And like it looked tough. Like
Crusty.
whatever he was doing looked incredibly difficult. And all I kept thinking was, oh my God. Like, who is this guy? Where did they find him? And so, and I'm, this is a gig out in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, all right, so maybe it was just like a last minute thing. They couldn't find somebody. They hired this local guy. And I'm like, whatever, I approach it the same way, be under the radar, show that you're a good section leader by not using words. And if you have to use words, always include words like can we try this differently? Can we do this quieter? Can we do this more together? And luckily, the bass trombone player and the tubist, they knew me very well. They've known me for 3 years, and so they were also like, "Oh God, what is this guy doing here?" and so I remember at one point, I asked the second trombone player, "Hey, can we do this tutti solo part a little bit more together? I'll lead it, and if you could just blend with me so we sound more unified, I think that would be great. So if we could just play a little bit quieter and do X, Y, and Z, this, and this." And he looked at me with daggers. Looked straight into my eyes, sitting right next to me, and he was just like, and then he goes over to the bass trombone player and starts talking shit about me right next to me, very quietly. But the bass trombone player has no idea that he's friends, that he has a good friendship with me. And so this guy who's venting off to him is just like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then immediately tells me about it. And I asked him, I'm like, so what did he say? He goes, to be honest, I shut off and I didn't want to listen to him because he was a bad person. He's has nothing nice to say, and he's not coming back.
Wow.
And let's just say this same fellow, not only did he undermine my, section authority, he undermined me as a musician. He undermined me because I was putting him in a threatening position. I don't see what it was, but he was offended. And I can consciously tell you, nothing I have done or did to him came off as offensive. And I, especially when I addressed the whole section, because I didn't want to point him out, that we should do things together a little bit differently, if we could play quieter here and all that stuff. And I really do believe I do a great job as a section leader and as a section player in understanding that hierarchy of playing. And let's just say I've never seen him again. I'm glad. I hope I don't have to ever see him again. But that sense of disrespect is so frustrating, especially when you have to play a few more concerts with this guy. And for the fun fact, he fell asleep in the middle of that concert.
What?
I'm not kidding.
He fell asleep?
And he snored.
Wow.
So I don't know if you know symphonic metamorphosis really well. In the
No.
second movement, you tacit. It's like dum dee da dum dum dee da dee da dee da, and
Oh,
it goes
that
around
one.
the whole orchestra, right? So they
Yeah.
just tacit trombones until they give you like a French horn and a trumpet cue, and then you come in.
Right.
The dude fell asleep
Oh my
like
God.
this and was snoring. And at
Oh
one point,
God.
I like, conscious, like, I'm like, oh my God, it's a concert. And I just like, oh my God. And I looked at the bass trombone player and he looks at me, corner of his eye, like, yeah, I hear it too. We could not believe what had happened. So this guy was a mess all around. And,
Mm,
if it's going to happen, if someone's going to disrespect me like that, I'm glad it was someone who was not important because I know I'd never have to see them again.
but that's not always the case, though, which is
Not
kind of the
always the
sad
case.
thing.
Yeah, and that's not always the case. Sometimes you're going to meet some very strong, opinionated people, and you have to learn, is this a fight you're going to want to take, or is this something you're going to regret?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Um, so thanks for sharing some of that kind of challenging stuff. I appreciate it. And
yeah,
it's, I guess, as an interviewer, I've been sort of like wrestling with like, oh, like should I ask my male interviewees about sexism in the field?
you
Why
should.
shouldn't I ask them? And
Yeah,
I guess, um, yeah, I mean, it should be equal opportunity for the question. So
it definitely should.
I don't want to only ask a woman musician about sexism for her, but maybe about for the men too.
I think sometimes, maybe not so much, maybe in our like generation of people, but I think it's some people don't realize what they say. And I think if some men would ask themselves before they asked a woman, would I say this to a guy? Would I say, well, I hope you play as good as you look? Would they, if they said that to a guy, do they think that might be a bit strange? I think that's really an important question to ask yourself. It's kind of like, is what I'm about to say going to be word vomit? Or should I really think about what I'm about to say to this person who has no idea who I am? Or even if you do um, know the person really well, really think about what comes out of your mouth because someone like me may never forget it.
Sure. Yeah. Um, yeah. Thanks for sharing your perspective.
Thank
And
you. Well, thank you for listening.
yeah. Um, I guess moving back to lighter things, we dove into conversation, and I didn't even hear or get a chance to ask, where did you grow up? Where are you from?
I grew up in Baldwin, New York. So my whole family have been there since the day I was born. I've grown up in Long Island. Never went to the city all that much. Definitely a suburban girl. And then I went to Boston in 2010 to start college, and then I haven't left since.
Wow. So um yeah, what has the scene been like for you? I mean, I guess um like maybe outside of playing for like those superstar events like for the
Mm-hmm.
Pops or for the BSO, like
Mm-hmm.
what's the rest of it been like? The scene and playing and opportunities and venues.
It's been a lot of fun. You know, it's actually sometimes very difficult to get into those scenes because, like I said, these communities are tight communities. You know, they really only want to hire the people they know. And so to get the opportunity to be hired as someone that they don't know entirely, it's, you really have to, you know, be really grateful for the work because like I had mentioned earlier, that may lead to other opportunities. And so whenever I get the opportunity to play with, more local orchestras, I treat it as if I'm, playing with the top ranked orchestras. I want to give them the best that I can give them. And the best that I can give them and the best personality I can put forward, it's really all about giving your best foot forward. And I'm someone who is 100% a believer in preparation, even to the smallest note. If you've got a whole note to play in an entire piece and that's it, you're done. Make sure it's the best whole note you could possibly play. You want to show that level of respect in any orchestra like that because they want to be like, wow, she or he was really reliable at that gig. We really liked having that person there with us. They were not only great playing wise, but when we ended up getting to talking to them and getting to know them, they had a great open personality. They really wanted to get to know us as a person. And so, I love getting a chance to play with local orchestras, that wonderful community of musicians that exist in every single one of them.
Outside of playing at Symphony Hall with the BSO or the Pops, what are some of your other, I don't know, maybe favorite venues or places that you've played?
Oh God, I forgot what this venue is called. It's out in Worcester. The Monozzle Brass played there a few years
Hmm.
ago. It's a Jesus, I'm gonna look it up while I'm talking to you. But it's
It's
this
like
beautiful hall. What
Mechanics Hall
school
or
play?
something.
Huh?
Isn't there a place called Mechanics Hall in
Yeah, I
Worcester?
think that's it. Hold on, Worcester Mechanics Hall. I think it's that. Yeah, it's Mechanics Hall. Beautiful, beautiful venue, and what feels like in the middle of nowhere in a cement block city.
Mm-hmm.
And that, along with Symphony Hall, my two favorite venues. It is that Mechanics Hall is so cool. It is so long. It's like a flat football field and like just a small tiny like stage area, but they decorate it and it has great acoustics. You would have never thought that, but it has great acoustics.
Wow, that's super cool.
Yeah, have you ever gotten a chance to see it?
No, I've heard the name, but I've never been there.
Really, if you ever get like they do a lot of music events there, and so I get like a mail thing every now and then, every few months, and they'll say some upcoming artists. So they do a lot of artists that show up there, and they oh my God, I love that hall. I had a chance to do a recording session with BMOP there once, and it was just us in this nice, beautifully decorated hall, and I just was like running around the place just because I could. Just because I wanted to see different vantage points. Like if I ever have to see a concert here, where would I sit?
Wow, super cool. Um, so what's next? Do you see yourself staying in Boston, or are you really following the orchestra dream? You're going to keep auditioning and go wherever the orchestra takes you.
Both. So, like the problem with me and my husband right now is that, we're coming to an age where we start talking about families and the start
Hmm.
of eventually our own family one day. But I'm also very career driven and I really want to win a job. And so there's this tough balance where I don't know what I want. I want that orchestral job, But you can't just be like, I want it, I'm going to get it tomorrow, done. We all know that there's like this huge thing that needs to happen. You need to, show up at the audition, win the job, get tenure, all these things. Um, and then, but I also have my freelancing in the meantime. So, I can't exactly pick up and leave Boston, let's say, to go to New York because I'm not getting work because my career has been established here. And so I'm going to keep working here in Boston. And my husband and I eventually would like to buy a home, but we're kind of stuck. Like, do we want to buy a home if I'm going to win a job, let's say, somewhere else, and here in the States or in, God knows, in Europe or something like that? So I definitely feel life struggles kind of bombarding us a little bit. And not that anything in life needs to have a time limit. We're always being told, it's your life, do what you want with it. But there's definitely a part of me that's trying to think about the future. And especially during a pandemic, it is very hard to think about that because you don't see the finish line in sight. When you have an audition, you see the finish line. Whether you're going to win that audition or not, where it's going to end. That there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And this pandemic, you don't have that light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe the vaccine is, but that vaccine is not ready for everybody yet. And so I finally just got, after all of these months of, like, I call it my yo-yo practicing, I finally feel like that I'm finally in control of who I am again, playing wise and personality wise. For these past, I would say 9-8 months, I felt like I've lost my identity, my core beliefs on who I am as a musician. And I feel like I finally, in the past maybe 6 to 8 weeks or so, have finally taken grasp of it again and tried to do something about it. And so that means preparing as if the world was normal, even though it's not. And trying to, if I was going to be playing for any of my former teachers right now, what would they say about my playing? How can I improve upon my playing without that self-sabotaging voice derailing me so far that I don't want to pick up the horn ever again? So between that and all these life obstacles of wanting to pick up and move to an orchestra that I hopefully will win one day, and freelancing in the scene, I kind of feel like I'm in a weird time in my life.
Okay. So if let's say you want a job but it was in an undesirable place. I don't know what that means for you, but a place like you got the first chair of some orchestra, maybe like a I don't know, A, B, or even C
Mm-hmm.
level orchestra, but it's in a place that you're just like really not excited about. Would it be worth it to go there, or like sacrificing your freelance career?
Right, I know. And that's hard because it's not just me that I have to think about. My husband's also an independent contractor, as you know, with his audiovisual work, engineering and stuff. And if I were to remove, let's say, to these ABC level orchestras, and if it's in a remote location where the music scene isn't exactly like the Boston music scene, that also means that he loses work too.
Mm,
And, we'd have to decide at that point, is the freelance work I'm doing here not only more financially stable than, let's say, a hypothetical job that I'd win with another orchestra, or is the experience I'm going to get with that orchestra more valuable than anything I'm going to be doing freelancing? And I think, oh, that's a tough call. I'm not money hungry, I'm more experience hungry. And I guess it would have to depend on the location. If it was, I guess if it was like, let's say in the middle of nowhere, Alabama, I'd probably say no. But if it was in the middle of, I don't know, somewhere in like Pennsylvania or something, and if something that I can reasonably drive to, and it's not like a 30-week season orchestra or something less, maybe I'd say yes to an opportunity like that, drive there, fly there, whatever, take a train and come back, but still be in Boston. It would definitely be a conversation we'd have to talk about. But I'm definitely someone who's more experience oriented than money oriented.
yeah. Um, Cool. Well, um, I don't know if I have a lot more to ask. Anything else that you want to share?
Um, I'm actually curious about you. What do you do? I know you suggest trombone
Who
playing.
who's this guy?
I
the
mean, so
the hell's this guy ask me to talk?
no, I mean, like, I want to know more about you too. So, like, what are your aspirations and goals and, things that you're working on currently?
Okay. So, um, I I grew up in the Boston suburbs. I grew up an hour south of the city in a small town. I lived in Hanover and also Hingham, which were fine. Much happier to live here in the city.
Hmm.
Um, Went to NEC for undergrad and masters in jazz performance, and I just finished my masters. I took 4 years off between undergrad and masters. I was super burnt out,
Hmm.
so I spent 4 years just kind of freelancing around town, trying to play,
Hmm.
practice, whatever. And then I was feeling sort of a plateau, so I went back for masters.
Hmm.
Just graduated at like just as the pandemic was starting that last May. So it's kind of a weird time to
Wow.
graduate. Yeah, but I'm glad that I finished it up. I
Hmm.
only had a couple months of virtual, which was
That's
fine.
thank God, right? I mean, you could probably tell me more than that, but like, I'm guessing virtual experience was not the same as in-person experience.
No, definitely not.
I think
Definitely not
that's
the
the one
same.
thing I'm grateful for is that I'm not in college now during a pandemic. Um,
Yeah.
it's too hard, I mean, not only having to be with yourself, but you don't have that social interaction. At least I know for myself that that inner voice that's always talking to myself, it would be so much more intense if I was in school right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um
So you mentioned that you were burnt out. Was it the school system that burned you out, or how much work the school gave you that burned you out?
hmm, Probably both.
Both. I felt
Cuz
the same way after I graduated from NEC. I was burnt out, and I know so many people who were burnt out after NEC, and I'm so glad I only went there for my master's.
yeah. Um yeah, it was a great undergraduate experience, but I was super burnt out
Hmm.
when I was done, and I still wanted to play. I think I had this cocky notion that I could gig enough that I wouldn't have to practice. And also I
Right,
was just burnt out, so I was like, "Oh, I've got rehearsals and I've got gigs, so I don't need to practice." I didn't end up practicing for a couple of years
right.
until my chops just got to a point where it's like, "Oh, shit, I've got to practice." It was
I
like a
think
point where I had
any
to.
freelance artist has been there, like you're just so busy. You're like, well, I'm still warmed up from the night before from another gig, so I'm ready to go. But you learn, I wouldn't say quickly. I would say I think you would probably agree. It's not like a noticeable change. Like it's one day you're playing great, the next day you're playing bad. It's like it starts to slowly decline, and you're like, what's happening? And by the time you're asking yourself those questions, you've already fallen off the cliff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think we've all, you're not a true freelancer if you haven't experienced those moments.
Yeah.
Right.
So so in the gap between undergrad and masters, I was just gigging, playing, doing a little bit of traveling, doing some touring, nothing major.
Hmm.
Um, Doing a lot of teaching. That's how I make most of my money, teaching kids, and that's what
Okay.
I'm still doing right now. And this summer, I just had this idea. I was thinking, like, I don't know, I just wanted to pay tribute to the Boston music scene since I've been here for 10 years. And um,
Well, I think what you're doing is great. I think, I feel like freelance musicians are the unsung heroes of the artistic community in a city. Everything that you hear, if you hear live music, it's freelance musicians. It's not your top rated orchestra players, it's your freelance community that's bringing that live music to you most of the time. So I think what you're doing and what you're providing to a community of people who maybe want to know a little bit more about those artists is absolutely phenomenal.
Thanks. I appreciate the validation. It's been exciting, sort of racking my brain. I'm not like a veteran journalist or interviewer. Um, But yeah, it was fun just like making a list. I was like, oh man, there's so many amazing trombonists in town. Like it's incredibly diverse. It's such a fun thought to think about interviewing all these people. The other day, I was interviewing this guy, Jeb Bishop, who's
Mm-hmm.
like, he's really into like kind of free improvisation. He's an
Mm-hmm.
amazing trombonist, but now I'm talking to you who's so deeply in the orchestral world. And it's like,
Right.
you guys are doing such different things, such different corners of the city, but you're both amazing in your own rights, doing different things. It's really cool to talk to all these different people doing different things.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well,
And
I hope I get to hear from you soon. Again,
yeah.
like hear from you more often. Is there a social media platform that you're currently on that you're, investing a lot of time in, or, something, a way we can support you more as an artist?
I appreciate that. I have yet to make the social media platform for the Bos Bones podcast, but I'm going to make an Instagram
Hmm.
and just to promote it, and I'm going to stream this all on some to be determined
Fair.
podcast service, and I'll make a YouTube channel and I'll put all the videos on there so you can listen to the audio in a podcast
Right.
service and watch the videos if you're inclined on YouTube. And as far as me and my social media presence, it's not not great right now. I mean, it's
Okay.
fine. It's a complicated relationship, and I'm
Social media is
sorting that
hard.
out.
It's
Yeah,
a it's a love-hate relationship. It really is. I hate that I love being on social media because at the end of the day, it really makes me mad at myself.
well, it's complicated. It's some people need it, and it's a huge part of their sort of online identity.
It is.
Yeah.
It really
And
is.
I'm not mad about that. That's cool. If you've got it, then work it.
Yeah,
And
you got it. You flaunt it.
yeah, I
You
don't
get those
have any
people,
kind
get
of
those followers, get them to watch you. That's great. That's a skill.
yeah.
Not, I don't have that skill.
You're doing something. You're doing some things right. Some stuff is working for you because you're doing great. um,
That staying quiet part, just, not too
mm.
quiet, just enough to just people make people curious.
Nice. Yeah. Cool. Well, let's call it for today, and
Yep.
let me know when you're playing some gigs in the future post
Oh,
COVID. Actually, my
yeah.
prediction is this. I think like by the end of last summer and like into
Mhm.
the fall, people were just starting to figure out like the best optimal way for outdoor performances and stuff. So
They
I think
were.
and it was too late. By the time we kind of had it figured out, it was too cold. But I
Yeah,
think
that's
this
it.
spring and summer, it's going to
Wow.
be much more.
You just said like the biggest thing. By the time they figured out it was too cold, I kid you not, I was gonna play a gig with Symphony New Hampshire. Things were going. I was one scared. I hadn't had a gig since March. I was supposed to be, when things got canceled, I was supposed to be playing BSO that week and Boston Lyric Opera. So like I was at my prime, and I'm in a place where I was like, how do I play with an orchestra again? And it was terrifying. I was so scared. And I was like, am I in shape? Can I do this? I don't know if I could play a pops concert with just brass musicians. There's nowhere I can hide if something doesn't work. I was struggling. And I got the call that day that they were canceling this outdoor concert, not because of COVID, but because it was cold outside.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if I'm happy, sad, upset, mad. Like I was so conflicted with so many emotions. Like I was like disappointed in myself that I was like happy that it was canceled, and I was also like, yeah, it's way too cold. I wouldn't have done that gig playing
Yeah.
outside. It was freezing.
Yeah. That's not
So
fun.
yeah, I agree with you. People really figured out how to do an outdoor concert way too late, especially in the Northeast. It's long gone. It was over.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is I think we're gonna have some more gigs this summer. I think it'll be a little bit better, and I
Yeah.
I hope to hear you play this summer. Let me know.
I hope so too.
Keep
I just
practicing. The gigs are gonna come before you know
I
it.
know you gotta be ready, guns blazing when all this is over. I promise. I told my husband, I'm like, when that vaccine becomes available for us, we're getting it ASAP. I don't
Yeah.
care if it's because we want to go on a trip together somewhere. I'm getting that vaccine. I need to like I need to be proven that there's going to be some normalcy returning to our lives soon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I wish you all the best. Good luck
Thanks.
in your other
Likewise.
interviews.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
All
I
right.
appreciate you calling me today.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Vicky. I'll catch you later.
All right. See you, Michael.
Bye. Thanks for listening. Comments, questions? Send me an email at bossbonespodcast@gmail.com. That's BOSBONES podcast@gmail.com. Or follow me on Instagram, YouTube, or Spotify. You can follow Vicky on Instagram at Ms. Vicki Garcia. Trombone Icon by Gregory Montigny from thenounproject.com. Special thanks to Celine and Jeffrey. Bos Bones theme written by me, Michael Prentke. Again, please follow at Bos Bones on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, or visit at michaelprentke.com/Bos Bones. Thanks for listening. See you next time.